Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Weird Music. This is the little show where we take little dives into albums that are, for whatever reason, unusual, peculiar, whatever you'd call it. Today we're going to discuss an album that I have covered on this channel in the past, albeit in a different, now defunct format. But I wanted to go over this album again because it's genuinely one of my favourite albums of all time. And I just really want to dive into this thing. This album is a massive influence on a lot of the kind of music I do, a lot of the approach to how I play guitar and stuff like that. So yeah, we're gonna discuss it again. So we're looking at the majestic ambient drone album, We Will Always Be by Wendy and Carl. So, of course, let us ask ourselves, who are Wendy and Carl? Well, Wendy and Carl is an American-based husband and wife ambient duo from Dearborn, Michigan, comprised of members Wendy Weaver and Carl Hultgreen. And having operated since the early 90s, Wendy and Carl have pushed out this incredible discography of cosmic space drones that take elements of shoegaze and dream pop to create this incredibly beautiful romantic ambient music. Much of their output, it just drifts off into the stratosphere, calmly taking you by the hand, guiding you into this blissful atmosphere. It's some of the most engrossing and beautiful music I've ever heard, and the album we're discussing today it's one that remains one of my favourite albums of all time, as I've mentioned already. And yeah, massive influence on so many things I've done. So let's get into it. So We Will Always Be is the duo's sixth studio album for the record label Kranky. The album sees the duo delving deep into their very textured drones, pushing out an album that really takes its time to develop over its 67-minute runtime. And it utilises drones created through guitars and bass rather than, the normally seen synthesizers that you'll often find within the ambient genre. It ends up being a drone album that's vastly different from what you'd normally see within the genre. It gives the music that the duo creates this very peculiar sound. It stems from conventional songwriting structures for the most part, yet there's still this myriad of textures, drones, instrumental passages, and it all just fades into each other to create this one long-form listening experience. Beautifully engrossing, and the sounds and tones created by the duo, it just feels so majestic and just so uplifting. It's truly wonderful. So let's go into it track by track then. This album's got 8 tracks on here, and it opens up with a short acoustic number for Rosa, where you've got Wendy Weaver singing about the weather, about love, and you've got these sort of textures going on in the background, and it's very airy and stuff, but there's something so genuinely sweet about the sentiment being presented in the track. It starts off the album in this really wonderfully romantic fashion, being a little different from their usual output, but with it being, I guess, a conventional song for the most part, but it still sounds like something that the band would compose anyway. When you get used to their output and stuff, it kind of makes sense as well. But it's a lovely way for the album to open up the album, though. It's almost like a precursor for what is the main album experience, which I would argue begins with the second track, Remember. And this throws us into this world of beautiful guitar lines that are fleshed out by delay and reverb effects, and over the top of it you just got Wendy's wonderful voice just effortlessly droning and crooning over the top of these very beautiful but kind of icy cold instrumentals. It's interesting. There's this very peculiar frosty quality to the track, and actually to a lot of the tracks on this album. But it comes across as very wistful and melancholy, and absurdly lovely and beautiful in its own right. It's one of my favourite compositions from the band because it just sweeps me off my feet every single time I hear it. I adore this track, and I think it's one of the most beautiful things they've done. And then from Remember, the album just effortlessly fades into the third track, Spires, which it's kind of got a sort of La Bradford-style guitar line pushing along what you hear in it, backed up by these very gentle bass notes and guitar notes it just stretches out for as long as it can. That delay just pinging it right off into the distance. It then transitions into the very aptly named The Frost in Winter. And this features a very beautiful twinkling guitar line that feels exactly like watching the light just catch the frost and it glistens in the beautiful sunlight. It really gets you that sense of just standing in a sort of cold forest and stuff. It's so lovely, so lovely. And then, it's just a bit of a short interlude, and that leads us into the second longest track on the album, called Looking Glass. This is a further pushing of those effortless drones. You just get enveloped in these effect-laden guitar lines that are being slowly pushed out by very subtle bass lines. I find it's at this point on the album I get really lost with it all, because up to this point I'm just sort of just completely thrown by the beauty and majesty of it all, and then we get to this point and there's a beautiful calming sense to it all, and it's so lovely. It's so easy to just get lost within those deep layers of guitars and bass, and once again it feels like being lost in that beautiful wintry landscape. You've got the sun's rays just glaring through the trees, illuminating the slight icy frost you can see in the air, and you see everything all around you. It's so beautiful, so beautiful. And so it's after this, I feel like you're getting the build up to the album's finale. We'll get to it at the end, but we get to this track. It starts with the wonderful nature of memory, and this is where you can really hear Carl utilising the EBO, and it creates these phenomenal sounding drones. And what I love about this track though is you've got this wonderful spoken word passage from Wendy, and it perfectly mixes into the song. It's so mysterious and icy and cold, and there's even a bit where she laughs at some point in it, but it just seems to work really well in it. It creates such an atmosphere, and I have to say the whole EBO just sliding up and down. It's so good, and one of the massive influences on what I try to do when I play guitar now. Trying to utilise EBO myself, and mixing it with various pedals effects and stuff like that. It's such a hypnotic, haunting, and beautiful track though, and it's amazing just how effortless it sounds though. It's got such a weight and majesty to it, but it's like Wendy and Carl just pluck this music out of thin air and turns it into something for us to hear. They're just so good at what they do. And once again, seamless transition brings us into the penultimate track, The Smell of Old Books. And this is another beautiful track that's just capturing that sunlight. The delays make those guitar notes play out for forever and ever, while gentle single notes just act as accents in the song. It's mystical, it's beautiful, and it just makes me feel weirdly at peace when listening to this thing. It's the whole album, to be fair, it has so many of these wonderful moments, and it just this peculiar sense of lifting my emotions with each and every rise of musical motifs, and then it just gently guides me through these various feelings that's been presented on it. And for the most part, it's just something wonderfully beautiful and romantic about it. There's a real sense of love being presented in this music. We'll get into that later as well. There's a reason for this, but you really get a sense of it listening to it as a listener, basically. But what's it all building up to? It's building up to the finale, the longest song on this whole album, the 19-minute Fainting in the Presence of the Lord. And this is one of the finest compositions Wendy and Carl have ever committed to take. It's, a track that just slowly unfolds. It just does its own thing. You've got these very peculiar, thin-sounding guitar lines that are just gliding across these very consistent and very sort of like, it's almost like organ drones, I'd say, like, like a church organ, just like bamming down, just like, and it's so beautiful though. And then at around 7 minutes, you hear that ebo coming in again, and man, it just makes it sound so incredibly heavy and dense, and it just pushes it all along into this beautiful existential place. Like, regardless of the religious aspect, you kind of get a sense of, what they're feeling through the name of it. That the majesty of light just being something way bigger than what you're seeing, basically, and it filling you up with emotions and feelings and everything. And yeah, it's such an impactful drone experience for me. Like, every time I hear it, I'm just sort of given a sense of something truly wonderful and majestic with it. It's such an existential beauty to it. It's so good. And yeah, I find We Will Always Be to be one of those perfect albums that just really captures such a beautiful sentiment and presents it so perfectly with each and every song. There's a slow build up to that powerful closing track, and it's phenomenal though. Like, it gives that finale such an amazing sense of power. It's also so romantic and so elegant and so majestic, and it just really taps into this this concept of beauty and love and nature, and just an appreciation for the things that are around you, the things that we naturally feel as humans. And yeah, like, it's so good though. Like, it's, as an album, this was a little different to a lot of what Wendy and Carl used to do. Like, on their previous albums, at least for Kranky as well, like, Wendy and Carl would have just their songs. They wouldn't blend into each other. They would end at the end and then move on to the next track with a little gap. But with this one, every single track is fading into each other, and it makes for this really long, incredible experience. And, it's just a little thing, but it does really make this one of, like, the best Wendy and Carl albums. And for me, it's definitely one of the most important ones though. Like, it's so beautiful to listen to, it's so good, and yeah, this is an album that will cement its place in my heart for many years to come. I just love listening to this. It just makes me feel I just feel great listening to this. It's so good. And so another thing I wanted to mention though, in my research for this album, I came across a wonderful review by Headphone Commute on Discogs, and it's a little review that perfectly captured so many sentiments I feel when listening to this album. But what surprised me was this wonderful quote from Wendy Weber in regards to the album, that it shifted my perspective into something wonderful. Like, I never knew this before listening to this album, and now that I know this, it's given it a context that just perfectly captures it captures the whole sentiment of the album perfectly, and it makes so much more sense now, like, why this thing is so beautiful, so lovely, and yeah, just so full of love. And the quote is as follows: "Life is short. Sometimes things you think are gonna last forever don't, and some things you aren't sure about end up lasting. What have we discovered? That things are not always hard, and remembering what we really wanted and who we really are means very simple things. For me, it is that I love music to no end, and I love to hear Carl playing the guitar more than just about anything else in this world. I play to hear him play. It's that simple." Man, after reading that, like, I cannot help but have a smile on my face. It just makes the album feel like this really true expression of love for one another. There's something a bit existential about it, but it revels in that fact, and it finds joy in the fact that it feels existential. It feels this powerful sense of love and beauty, and it's that existential understanding of what you're on this earth for, and For Wendy, it's for music, and specifically the music that her husband is playing. It's something there's something so truly beautiful about that, and yeah, for me, like knowing that, it makes this so much more special now. It makes all that love, all that beauty, all that emotion makes so much more sense. It's so good. So with that, I think we've come to the end of today's episode of Weird Music. I'm once again really happy to have talked about one of my favorite albums of all time. This album just fills up my soul, and it makes me feel so satisfied and content with life. There's so much love that's been poured into this album by both Wendy and Carl. I feel like they just pour their emotions into it and have made something so beautiful. And I feel like every time I listen to it, those emotions come across so perfectly. So, I hope you go check this one out for many reasons. For that, but also for for the fact that this is ambient music being produced with guitars rather than synthesizers. It's nothing wrong with synthesizers, of course. It's just nice to hear different kinds of ambient music, and with guitars you get very interesting textures. Like, it makes it very interesting, and I love it for that. For now though, I'd like to thank you for watching today's episode of Weird Music. I hope you've enjoyed it. I wish you all the best. Take care, and bye bye for now. Bye bye.